welcome back to another episode of the Strong Collectors Podcast. I'm your host, Dakota, here with my co-host, Jordan. And today in episode 101, we are taking a trip down memory lane back to probably our biggest interview. I don't even know how we got Todd McFarlane on this podcast. Well,
About
I do know
a year ago.
Yes.
A couple of wide-eyed, young, innocent podcasting hopefuls were, I don't know. I wonder how many subscribers we had back then. Is there a way to check? Can you say how many we had?
I think I can go back, but I think it was probably less than 100 for sure.
Very many. And yeah. So, and that's interesting because people who subscribe now, I don't know if they have gone back and seen that, which is kind of cool that you can go back. We did talk to Todd McFarlane in real life. We couldn't believe it at the time. We were quite nervous and starstruck, but
yes,
it did happen, and we have some additional proof of it because you're getting a rare sneak peek. Because for about probably the first half hour of the interview, Todd, I asked him what he likes to or we asked him what he collects. He said board games. I said, "What board games do you like?" And he had a lot to say about board games.
He did. I was going to say
Dakota trimmed some down.
Yes. And now you're getting that trimmed out version of it. Because like you were, we were nervous to be talking to Todd McFarlane. We didn't know whether we were going to have 30 minutes with him or 45 minutes. And like Jordan said, he spent the first 30 minutes answering one question. And if you've listened to some interviews from Todd McFarlane, you know, he can sometimes be long-winded. He likes to give his answer in the fullest. So during our initial editing, I cut out some of this board game talk, but I think it's still pretty interesting getting to hear what he likes to collect. And he starts mentioning possibilities of doing Spawn board games, maybe as a possible Kickstarter coming up in the future. So I would love to talk to him again to see how close we are to seeing a Spawn board game Kickstarter. So
yeah, I'll text him, see what he's up to.
Yeah, I would like to get him back on the show. I want to talk to him about the Batwing and all that stuff. But all right, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here is Todd McFarlane talking about board games.
And then I don't know if it's collecting. I buy a lot of board games. But I play them. So I don't know if it's because I play a lot of them or because my wife is like, why do you need so many damn board games? Right. So but I'm like, this is a small collection compared to other people.
What's a board game you're liking right now?
Most of the board games, I mean, I used to do a lot of sports because I'm a sports guy. I used to do a lot of sports sim stuff. And so there was one company that you could argue is sort of the granddaddy of them all called I call it APBA, but other people call it APA. And they were one of the ones that came in, and then, you know, Stratomatic sort of borrowed from them that, you know, and you could argue did better marketing and getting out there. But APBA was the first thing that I ever remember sending off in the mail as a kid, because me and my brother would buy all the sports books, and then they have those ads, you know, that hey, send away for a brochure, and they give you a couple sample cards, and then as part of it, if you wanted to buy the game, it was like $7.95, so we had to mow a bunch of lawns, and then you got it, and it's this game that is essentially the equivalent of esports, you know, the coding, except for it's just now raw numbers on a card. If you've ever seen like Stratomatic and stuff like that, and you roll dice, and it's just permutations based on the stat that the players had the year before. So you were basically seeing if you could replicate which is always weird to people. They're going, why do you want to play with something that already happened and you know what the results were? Right. And you're going, I just want to see if I can replicate it. It's like, yeah, but then you just get to the same results that you know, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, to me, it was more of, is the math right? Right? Is this game, is this model, is this coding, is it right? Is it accurate? And so that was it. So I got way more sports sim games than I should. For instance, just on baseball, I have from 1901 all the way up to present. So any year you can think of between 1901 to now, which is 120 years, if you have a favorite year or a favorite player, a favorite team, you can come in my closet, we'll find it, we'll play that. So we're up for, and the same with football and basketball, whatever. But then a couple of years ago, I started buying some board games for what they call the war game category, and then it's interesting how you sort of find what you like and what you don't like very quickly. And I was buying games, and this should come as no surprise. I was buying games because how the board looked, right? If the board was like I was looking, I don't know if you ever gone to this website called Board Game Geek. If you've never been there, you will get lost.
Okay.
But it has every game possible, it seems like, since the dawn of man. Like even if you put in chess, they have like all the info on chess. So it's all the way from chess from 1492 all the way up to today. Any game you played, you can think of off the top of your head, type it in, and you're going to get this data bank on it, and it's kind of cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So it tells you the categories. It gives you links to the categories. It gives you ratings that people give the ratings of how popular it is, when it came out, forums that you can talk about, marketplaces, videos on how to play it, blah, 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 blah. So it's pretty informative website, and it's massive. But they break it down into different categories, and one of the categories is war games. And so war games, for the most part, there's a lot of them are simulate like historical war, but also within war games would also be things like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and stuff like that. I tend to the historical stuff, but find that World War II is not really my cup of tea. And there's a lot of games they call hex grids. So it's like a hexagon. And there's like, look almost like they take a map and they put a honeycomb on it. And the reason is because in that way, wherever your piece is, you can move it in 6 different directions to another honeycomb. And that's how you do sort of movement. I found that I'm not really into that, right? I'm like, and a lot of the moving pieces have numbers on it. You got to constantly be doing like adding, subtracting, which is weird because I like the math on the sports stuff, but not on the war stuff. So the war games that I do like are more what I would call chess, right? So it's more, I move, you move, I move, you move, and you're just trying to counter within the confines of stuff. And I know my wife doesn't like them because she wants to be laughing while she's playing a game.
Sure.
I don't need to. I'm more about like what's the intelligence of this game. So right now, if I had to name the number one game, if I could only take one of those games to an island, it would be a game called Imperial Struggle. It was the guy who created it had a game called Twilight Struggle that was like this massive successful game. And he's also a comic book fan, which is weird because every now and then he's DM me going, "Oh, cool, I collect your stuff, Todd." But it's always interesting when somebody has a big hit in a game. I follow the designers to see what their next game is, because I always think it's like going to be like sort of a knockoff of what was working, and it's sort of weird, right? So in this case, this designer, Jonathan, his first name, had this massive hit, right, across the wargaming platform. And then his next game was a game about the presidential election between Nixon and Kennedy in 1960. Right? And I'm like,
very different.
It seemed like and then his third game, which is this one I'm talking about, which is Imperial Struggle, now goes back and borrows a lot of the same mechanics from his first massive hit, but then ratchets it up even more. So if you think about it as like, and I don't know, maybe you guys are too young for this, but one of the tricks people used to do on TV, what they call plate spinning on sticks, right?
Yeah.
And how many plates can you keep spinning, right? So some of these games, in my mind, are plate spinners that you can't just focus on one way of winning. You have to be aware of about 8 sort of ways for you to win, and you also have to know how your opponent can win, and you have to know his 8 ways, because at times you got to stop doing what you're doing and you got to actually almost block what they're doing as you're sort of getting to the end of the game. And all these are on time sequences, if you will, either number of cards or the number of turns, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, to me, I don't mind being challenged to go, can you beat me? Right? Can you beat me or can't beat me? But then sometimes I bring them in. I'm going to show you. Hang on a sec.
All right. Yeah.
So I brought one game in. I brought this one game in. It's called Freedom, the Underground Railroad. And it's about
I think I may have heard of this one.
Yeah, it's about the theme of it is, can you get the slaves up to Canada and freedom, right? It seems like a sort of a weird concept, and it's really odd because when you get people to play it, and I brought it into the office, people get really nervous about it because every time one of the blocks goes away, it means they didn't save a slave, and they take it really personal. And so it messes with their strategy. But anyways, the way that game goes is if you play it, you move, and then the board moves on its own.
Okay.
It's got sort of an AI. So you move, board moves, you move, board moves.
Is it like cooperative then?
Or it can be. You can play 1, 2, 3, or 4. So you can. So, but people are just the opposite. Go, hey, you can play solo or whatever else. So I get them to play. Now again, you're not going to really beat a good board game.
Mm-hmm.
If good solo board games done right, you only beat 25% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can beat it all the time, why are you playing it?
Right.
It's like beating up on your 5-year-old, son. Like there's no challenge. So, but you have to figure out now how to play the game and be skilled enough to be able to know what you're doing, even though there's a lot of randomness when you shuffle things, whatever else. So, but I get people here play it, and so if the board wins, I call it the cardboard god, right? So the cardboard god, because you're not really playing against anybody. It's which actually arguably the most infuriating part of it. When you lose, you were in the room by yourself, so you got nobody to blame but your own stupidity, right? So you always go, I'm going to play this again because you're so mad at yourself. But anyway, so I keep track now. I don't know if you guys can see, I had to update it the other day. The cardboard god is 34-0.
Wow.
It's won 34 times in a row. Now, I know when I post that on the Board Game Geek, they're like, Todd, you're playing it wrong. You shouldn't, it shouldn't win. But I'm like, I'm not playing it 34 times in a row.
Right.
That might have been 20 people playing it once, and some of them played it twice, whatever else. But it's not hard that none of them figured it out, right? But it's really interesting when you tell them how to win, the smiles or the anger on their face, depending on at the end of the game, right? So it's weird how we can delude ourselves. So for example, and then we'll get back to another question. One of my employees went there and they go, I want to play that game because he plays a lot of board games. So he's like, I know how to play board game. And I'm like, okay. So I go, there's three things you need to do to win this game. Number one, you need to grab all these 3 tokens. You have to have all 3 tokens. That's 1. Okay. 2, you have to get X number of slaves up to Canada, right? It's a fixed number or more. 2. And 3, you can't have this many slaves been captured. Those are the 3, right? Conditions. So he was playing, and then he got, as soon as you fill up the board of the captured slaves, and it's like game's over. So he got there, and it was game over. Game was over. He walked out, and he went, oh man, I almost won. If it wasn't for that one move, I would have won. I'm going to do it again, Todd, tomorrow. I'm going to try it again, or whatever. Now, he walked away. I didn't really want to sort of injure his sort of ego at that point. But when he left, I turned to somebody and I went, how did he almost win? He didn't get all 3 of the tokens. He didn't even get to the number of people you have to get to Canada. And he got too many people. Like, he literally was 0 for 3 of them. You have to get all 3 of them. I understand if he said I got 2 out of the 3 and then I lost.
Yeah.
He was 0 for 3. And somehow in his mind, he was like, just
is close.
Almost this close. So I go, okay. So anyways, he thought he had a good time, even though he got smoked. Didn't know he got smoked by the cardboard god. But anyways, I play a bunch of them.
Have you ever thought, or have you done any
board
I know your
game?
question is, am I going to make a board game? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, we're going to go because I see it. I see like a couple years ago, we made our first Kickstarter, right? And so we came out, that was right at the pandemic. And that figure, that Spawn figure, as an action figure, set a record for the most sales for that category ever for Kickstarter, and the most dollars. And I think even the most individual accounts, like it set a bunch of records for them. And yet I think we ended up just around $3.5 million, right? Which is a big number,
Yeah.
one figure.
Mm.
Yet at that same time, there were 2 board games that were going, and one ended up at about 9 million, and the other one, based on this other popular game called Gloomhaven, they came out with Frosthaven. I think that one ended up at 15 million.
Wow.
Right? Like, and so you're going, wow. So as big as we thought we were, as many records as we were setting, multiply that by 5.
Right.
Right. And that was board games. So Kickstarter is this sort of go-to place for board games. And having talked now to some of the big designers of board games, they're all like, hey, Tom, if you ever want to do one. So we've been getting more and more heavy, because the category I play, war games aren't really, for the most part, especially historical, aren't really very popular in terms of the amount of games they sell. But if you get into the Star Wars and the Marvel and, sort of the fantasy stuff, those sell a lot, right? And a lot of them come, as you can imagine, with little miniatures, right? Where it has a little bit of like Warhammer-esque feel to it. And the reason why people play Dungeons and Dragons. So to me, it's like, oh, I think I can almost have my cake and eat it too, do a little bit of a war game, which is sort of what I tell my writers on the Spawn comic books. It's just war. This is an ongoing war. But we make so many toys, we can just take our own prototypes, shrink them, and we'll have literally all the little miniatures all ready to go, right? Like, come on, I think we could do a game that would look cool, would feel badass, and the Spawn fans will like it, and then people who like fantasy would dig it, because they'll see the quality of the little miniatures in it. So we'll get to it. That conversation's been heating up.
All right, very exciting. That's cool. So I guess getting back to talking a little bit about the transition, right? Starting working in comics, getting into toys. I guess what kind of led you to make that leap, or what made you want to start working in making toys?
Okay. Wow. That was a lot about board games.
That was.
But yeah, that's fun, man. I don't know. It's weird to think that it was like a year ago now. But yeah. I am curious, as you said, and maybe our listeners are too, where we are with that potential Spawn board game. So
yeah. And like we said at the beginning, if you haven't heard the original, it's a 2-part episode, because we got to talk to Todd for so long that I split it up into 2 episodes. You can go back, listen to him talk about getting into comic books, starting Spawn, some about the Spawn movie. We've learned a little bit more about that since the interview.
Jamie Foxx is in the hospital right now.
Oh, shoot. That's probably not good for the Spawn movie.
Yeah.
Jeremy Renner just got out of the hospital. Maybe is the Spawn movie cursed?
It's cursed. Oh yeah, because he's supposed to be in it, right?
He's supposed to be Twitch. Yeah.
Spawn movie curse. I don't know. I'll have to ask Todd about that.
All right. Well, go back and listen to the original 2 episodes. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, stay strong.